but he refused because he believed totally in holistic approaches, which sounds like he went the right way. He was stacking protocols on top of that, which is what I advocate that you all never do, because if you stack protocols, first of all, you don't know what works. And second of all, they can contraindicate each other, meaning that they nullify each other, meaning you don't get the effect at all, or it makes them in fact worse. And now you end up with something you never wanted to have, which is an advanced, aggressive cancer moving through your body that now you can do nothing about. Now, this is how this went down. Sometime in October of 2003, Steve Jobs went in to have a scan. The scan came back and showed that he had a mass on his pancreas. Just from a scan, it was by accident that they actually found it. But in October of 2003, they then diagnosed him with cancer. All right, they call it a PNET, pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor, all right, meaning that there was a tumor growing inside of him, and they recommended he have something called a Whipple procedure. If you don't know what that is, it means that they're going to remove the first, almost 50% of the pancreas. They're going to then take out the gallbladder. Then they're going to take out the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum, and it's a whole set. And then they have to reattach all the blood vessels and the digestive system to make sure it all works after that. But there's no way it can work properly because you took too many pieces out. Now, they recommended that, but he refused because he believed totally in holistic approaches, which sounds like he went the right way. He was stacking protocols on top of that, which is what I advocate that you all never do, because if you stack protocols, first of all, you don't know what works. And second of all, they can contraindicate each other, meaning that they nullify each other, meaning you don't get the effect at all, or it makes them in fact worse. And now you end up with something you never wanted to have, which is an advanced, aggressive cancer moving through your body that now you can do nothing about. But he put up a good fight. Here's what happened. Now, he did change his diet. And when he changed his diet, I thought that he would go to a plant-based, vegetable-based kind of diet. I thought that's what he did. He didn't do that. He did something called a fruitarian diet, meaning that he went hard on fruits, which are high in sugar, which contributes to a cancer. See how the blood, everybody? That's why I'm always adamant about blood and blood sugar, because blood gets us into everything. Along with the fruitarian diet, he also then started doing acupuncture, where you take the needles and spin them into somebody's skin, and then that's supposed to activate a pressure point, which actually gives the person relief or stimulates, in this case, it was supposed to stimulate his immune system. This has been proven to work, okay? So there are documented cases of people who actually have had great success with doing this. The only problem is you have to do it by itself, so you don't know if something else is actually causing the effect or if it's just the acupuncture itself. You must isolate protocols to see what is working. At the same time he's doing all this, he actually goes to what? Herbal remedies. So he's stacking fruitarianism on top of acupuncture, on top of herbal remedies. It's just a whole category of herbs that actually can, within the category, contraindicate themselves, meaning poison you. All right, when they break down into their byproducts in your body, they have to be collected somewhere. Sometimes they combine and they form worse poisons in your body that can actually maim you, paralyze you, and or kill you. Ask Bruce Lee about that. Now, the last thing he tried was spiritual and psychological managing of his thoughts in his mind. Completely agree with that. That doesn't interfere with anything else that you're doing, and it's not going to contraindicate anything. It is just going to be a healthy way for you to deal with the disease when you have it in front of you. However, whenever you have a disease and you are dealing with the psychosomatic part of it, the thing is, you should have never went to get diagnosed if you were going to do the healthy stuff anyway, because the diagnosis inputs a stress into your mind that you cannot forget. And that, everybody, stress is not an abstract. It will actually decrease your immune system, the very thing you need to fight a cancer of any kind, let alone a pancreatic tumor. Oh my goodness. All right. And then on the other side, when we're talking about the psychosomatic effects, you can't make that work if you don't believe it. You see, psychosomatic only works if you believe it. That's why you have to do these trials in a facility that looks professional, where people are wearing lab jackets, pocket protectors, and you guys see, All right, pocket protectors. So it looks official, so somebody will actually have to take you seriously and they have to believe you. And so I do agree wholly with him going with the psychological and the spiritual practices in order to raise his vibration, in order to get his mind right, to get that diagnosis out of his head. But was it the best thing to do to even hear the diagnosis? No. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The term. Steve Jobs changes his mind because the doctors convince him that if he does not have this Whipple surgery, that it's going to be a wrap. All right, your life is going to end very quickly. So he says yes, and in July of 2004, he actually takes the surgery, the Whipple surgery, the one where they remove half of your pancreas, your entire duodenum, the first part of your small intestine, and your gallbladder, which regulates fat breakdown so that you can get cholesterol to make, hormones and neurotransmitters, enzymes inside your body, right? Well, he decides to do this, and the doctors heavily criticize him because they are saying, you didn't do it when we first advised it in October of 2003. Now, if you guys don't know anything about a PNET, it is slow moving and it is less aggressive, meaning that if they left it alone and he had continued with his treatments, he would have lived longer than if he had the surgery in the first place, because that's the characteristic of this particular cancer. They convinced him, he says yes, because he's listening to these professionals who are wearing these lab jackets and they have the pocket protectors on. You can't listen to everybody just because they wear a jacket, they have a protector, they got a stethoscope around their neck. They're trained in one thing. You will never get a non-surgical opinion from a surgeon. So you have to now yourself go out and find ways that work for you. If we come back to the diagnosis, 2003, and then the time that he takes the surgery, July 2004, everyone, that is 9 months. When we're speaking about cancer, it's nothing. So, and they were so upset with him. They were lambasting him, talking about, if he'd have done this sooner, he would be over this. But later on, you come to find out that he actually had, at the end of his life, post-surgical, not cancer, post-surgical complications that led to an infection that actually caused the cancer to metastasize because they didn't get it all right? And why they didn't do radiation, I heard nothing about that, but they didn't do that either to try to get the satellite cells because at the time he was too weak. But Steve Jobs was a smart man. He actually, while running companies, decided that he would continue with his fruitarian diet that actually enables him to remain strong. It gave him energy and stuff like that so he can go on with his day-to-day grind. Now, the thing is, when Steve Jobs continued with his diet, you're continuing with a fruitarian diet, meaning high in sugar. Now it's fiber, everybody, don't get me wrong. It's some nutrients, but it's sugar. And sugar is the main thing that feeds a cancer. Because cancers are yeast-enabled, not yeast-based, yeast-enabled. If you feed sugar to the human body, and there is yeast there, the yeast eats the sugar, almost absorbs it like a kid eating candy. However, after that, what happens is we then have the absorption of the yeast by the cancer, all right, which tends to engulf those kinds of cells, which is where clusters usually come from. And now we got a huge problem because now we have cancer clusters and we have circulating satellite cells that actually result in a metastasis, meaning a death sentence. You have now cancerous cells going around the body, lodging themselves, embedding themselves, and now we have huge issues like death. We'll continue this series on Mr. Jobs, the man who I believe could have been here had he had better advice, better methods, but I hate to see a visionary like him go away.